Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Movement and Performance Podcast, where it is my goal to help people get active and to reconnect with their body. Today, I have with me Steve Herrmann. He's the director of the University of Kansas Weight Management Programs, where he's also a research assistant professor within the Division of Weight Management and Physical Activity. Today, we'll be talking about all things weight loss and metabolism. So without further ado, let's get right into it. How would you define metabolism? You and I understand it, but the average person, they hear the word metabolism and sometimes they get a bit confused.
The metabolism or resting metabolic rate is essentially uh, the amount of calories we burn just to sustain life. So if I were to sit here all day, we could estimate how many calories I'd burn sitting here all day. We could measure it like we talked about, with a metabolic cart, like one of those devices used to measure fitness. You can use for resting metabolism. And then we can also, on top of that, the energy expenditure we get from exercise is a piece of it. And the energy expenditure just from moving around, like if I go walk to my car, I'm going to burn some calories. It's not a lot of calories. We wish it was more, but it's something. And so your metabolism is made up of all of those things, with your resting metabolism being the most. Your body ramps up metabolism to digest the food you eat. The metabolism, or the energy you use to do exercise and just your daily living.
And what about the brain and thinking? I know that might not, we're talking mostly about physical activity, but if someone thinks more, will that increase metabolism?
There's some interesting studies out there. It probably does have some impact, and almost seeing it from different ways, in relaxation, where listening to music might lower, from a meditation standpoint, your energy expenditure is lower, and those types of things. I'm not sure if I've seen it more from, like, let's give people challenging math problems, but likely, if you're experiencing that, it's also a stressful situation that might you might be releasing a little bit of adrenaline and trying to work through that, which could cause some small variations there.
Right. So, I guess, are there any other things that might impact metabolism to like, for example, sleep? Like, should someone be resting more? Again, I know today's about physical activity, but
Yeah.
are there any other pieces or impacts of metabolism if someone's trying to think about how they're going to apply this in their life? Is there any other strategies as well?
I think we can look at it a few ways, but one of the things to make sure I understand is that it's like everything's interconnected. Um, and so for someone that goes out and does very high intensity workout, that would maybe on the surface be very, very positive, but maybe they weren't prepared for that, and it causes some soreness, and then their activity the next day or two is lower than it would have been if they would have done something of moderate intensity, and be able to do that 3 or 4 days a week. Same thing with sleep. If something impacts your sleep, and we're doing some work with sleep and weight and sleep disorders. When people don't sleep well, they have daytime sleepiness. They might be less likely to exercise or plan, within their day to exercise, and so that poor sleep could impact that. Lack of exercise could cause poor sleep. So they feed on each other in different ways. Stress could impact sleep, could impact exercise, and so it goes. It's this web of how these things balance on each other.
Can't just isolate one, right?
Yeah, we want to, and so when we talk about it too, we talk about small changes over time. It's a marathon, and so we talk about how do we impact those different areas. So from resting metabolism, if we can maintain our muscle as we're losing weight, that can help maintain our metabolism. Because when we lose weight, weight is one of the bigger drivers of metabolism. Our metabolism will probably go down as we lose weight.
Mm,
But like, that's okay. We have less body that we need to feed. So the metabolic rate in ratio to my body size probably actually improves.
mm,
But yeah, maintaining muscle or increasing muscle can help. And again, that resting metabolism is the biggest component. Exercise, obviously, that's one of the more variable things that we can do to increase, the number of calories we burn. And it's not just about burning calories, but all the other fitness and health benefits that come along with being active.
mm,
And then that lifestyle activity, and sometimes we talk about those changes. So my past job, I parked like an extra 100 yards, further in the parking lot from where my boss parked. And one time he asked me, why do I do that? I said, well, I kind of calculated it's an extra 100 yards. I do that a couple times a day, and we do that a few hundred days a year. And like by the end of the year, I did a marathon more than you, just parking. And so that few seconds to walk each day doesn't feel like much, but
mm,
I did a marathon. Yeah.
right.
And so those little changes of, hey, maybe park further away in the parking lot, when you go to the store, get off on the bus stop or something, a stop early and walk an extra, a couple blocks. Those individual events maybe aren't all that transformational, but doing those several
You can
times throughout each day and throughout each week can pay off.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things that came to mind as you were talking. One was like, how everything's intertwined. I notice myself, the more stressful days that I have and the days that I'm in the office more, I tend to want to eat more chocolate. I feel like I need that rush. It could be the fact that it's just there, and I can see it, it's within reach. But there's a lady who has like a little chocolate, container right now. And she, oh yeah, everybody feel free to take. The days I'm in the office, I'm like, I ate so much more chocolate than like, why did I do it today? And I'm one of the people that is not concerned as much about weight loss. If anything, I would need a little, I'm always looking to put more muscle mass on, but I do try to limit my addiction to sugar, it's, for other reasons. It's not just always weight, but yeah, the fact of like, if I sleep less or I have less ability to fight off that resistance. And then sometimes if it's not within reach and it's not even there, I don't even crave it. So
Yeah.
like out of sight, out of mind type of thing. So like, there's all these pieces that play a role
Yeah.
in that situation.
I think that's a great example, and so people will experience some of that differently. And funny enough, just yesterday I was presenting to our group that's in some patients that are in our maintenance program,
Mm,
and we were talking specifically about
mm,
stress management, and also like so these are phase two. So sometimes we try to share a little bit more detail than just like, hey, you should exercise because it'll reduce stress, but like why. And so when we're experiencing stress, that cortisol is released, and it can impact a whole bunch of different organs in our body, and some of the triggers are this desire for sweet foods and those types of things, so that matches.
mm,
I know when and I share with the group too, when I'm stressed or there's a stressful time at work, like the first thing for me, and I know this about me, and I got, this is where we're all on this journey.
mm,
Very few people have it all figured out. Exercise is the thing that goes. I'll skip that to get this other stuff done.
mm,
Um, and with other people, that idea of having trouble sleeping then because of the stress, and that's going to impact how they eat, having food around. Sometimes we built those habits and the triggers. So just the sight or the smell of something might stimulate this urge to have something like that. So like I
mm,
said, we can use those habits and that idea of a habit loop to try to break that habit. So sometimes it's removing those things. Like if you had that at home, you could just not have it there. And the other way is to add other visual cues to our environment. So that might be, having some more nutritious snacks around the office, or, you talked about like set your walking shoes on your favorite recliner. So when you get home, like you see them there, and the decision to sit down, you actually have to physically move your shoes. And so that might be enough to like, all right, let's retrain that I get home, I should go for a 10-minute walk.
Mm.
So it's behavior mixed
Yeah.
with physiology and everything. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So would you say, I mean, I'm sure this sounds like a no-brainer, but some people are maybe born with some physiology that is going to make the journey harder than others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're learning more about that.
Mm.
Everything from the genetic side of things, which there's uh, from a genetic standpoint, there's certain diseases that are, like linked to like a single gene.
Right.
And there's other things like heart disease or cardiovascular disease or even obesity, and that it's not as simple as this one gene. So we can measure that and know. And so they're using for a lot of these conditions, polygenic risk scores. So that just means they're using a whole bunch of different genes to try to identify if someone's at a higher risk of gaining weight or being overweight or having obesity. And I mean, we actually use one test clinically. It tests about 80 different genetic variants. A lot of times it comes back as negative, and it's maybe not a genetic link or not those genes that is linked to a person, but somebody that it is positive for, they're going to have a more difficult time. Can they overcome that through lifestyle? Maybe. There's new medications that can also help. Some of the GLP-1s that help affect our appetite and other areas are pretty effective at helping people eat less that maybe haven't been successful doing it on their own. We'd love that everybody could do this through, eating better and exercising more. It's maybe simple from an energy balance standpoint, but it's really difficult when you have
Yeah.
those other things that are, hormones that are making it more difficult, or genetic risk factors and those types of things. So learning a lot more. Don't have all the answers. I mean, the gut microbiome is a whole other field
Right.
that
Right.
is moving along pretty rapidly. But I think, we'll probably look back in 10 years and we'll be in a completely different place in how, where we are now and how we understand uh,
Yeah.
genetics and weight management.
Yeah, I think about it a lot of times as, generally speaking, obviously there could be a disorder or a mutation or something, but generally speaking, populations of people evolved for a certain environment and to survive in these types of environments. So now you kind of have to figure out what environment was your physical activity or weight management, or what was it set up for? That's not so
Yeah.
easy. And how do you come as close to possible to finding, were you in a place that had much less calories? Did you have more access to calories? Or maybe, I don't know exactly, you know, all the details, but you did survive well for some type of environment. So like
Yeah.
there's got to be some type of, it's almost impossible to transport ourselves to it because of the modern American world. But how close can you figure out what it is that would get you to move more and eat less or eat more, depending on your
Yeah.
goal or your environment that you survive for?
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. Um, y- y- from a few lenses, one, um, something like occupational activity, the amount of activity we do at work has changed dramatically in the past, 70, 80, 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there's a lot of jobs like I have, and where you sit around all day. And so that's a lot of energy expenditure that's just not happening. And so then we have to try to make that up through exercise or other means. And at the same time, food availability has become um, uh, uh, much easier. So instead of having to grow or go find our food, there's food everywhere, and sometimes the cheapest food is the food that's maybe higher in calories and maybe not setting us up for success. So we have all these factors that have changed really quickly and like you said, our bodies were sort of um, um, in tune for preservation. And so our bodies want to hold on to calories. Our bodies want to, maintain our weight. Our bodies want to try to preserve our life, and that's how they can do that. So, you're sort of fighting an uphill battle in some cases especially when we're talking about like the weight loss
Right.
lens.
Are there any strategies? I know we talked about some already, but are there any strategies that you maybe have seen firsthand or with clients or patients or in the research setting that have helped with weight loss?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I think we can look at, large portion of the population and some general strategies can be really helpful.
Mm.
There are segments that are just different, like some have an issue, other health conditions or um, hormone imbalance or metabolic condition. Like there are other things, of course, um, but I think um, what people find challenging is that a lot of times they're trying to manage their weight on their own.
Mm.
Um, it's sort of a private thing. I think that the stigma around excess weight is real. And so people aren't always willing to seek out help. And so they try something for a period of time and maybe don't get results that they had hoped for, or for the amount of work they put in, the results aren't that motivating. And so maybe they stop. Or they're viewing it and they're doing something very, very different or very, very drastic for a period of time, a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day thing, or maybe it's for a year, and they
Mm.
get the results and then they just go back to what they were doing previously. So I think, some general recommendations. The average American doesn't eat nearly enough vegetables. Um, they're depending what you read, maybe 10% of US adults eat enough vegetables.
Mm.
That's self-report, so they're probably not recalling their portions very effectively. So it's
Right.
I'd bet money it's lower than 10%.
Mm.
Um, and and a lot of people aren't comfortable cooking.
Mm.
Uh, they're not comfortable meal planning and meal prepping and doing those things. And so when we break down some of our programs, there are so many variables. And like we've talked about today, there's so many things that impact weight and metabolism and our desire to eat or ability to exercise, that we try to simplify things. And so some of the programming that we use is really understanding that we're going to work with patients or people on this continuum. And let's look at the typical standard American diet, not
Mm.
very good quality, and we want to move people on this continuum towards this idealistic whole foods meal plan. Most people aren't going to get there. It would be great if they did. I don't. I mean, I try and strive and you do those types of things, but we want to move people on that continuum to a place where they can manage effectively from nutrition side or from that exercise and physical activity side. And
Mm.
so to do that, nutritionally, we provide some more structure and that structure is in terms of simplifying their meal planning. Maybe it's one home cooked meal a day, which average, US adult might not be doing, but just one. And then we want to focus on increasing fruits and vegetables, which is, if 95% of the population is not getting enough, that's a big task to go do. Okay,
Right.
so now I got to cook and get vegetables in. And so then, in some of our programs, we'll use meal replacements of different sorts that are fortified, higher levels of protein to help support their, simplified portion size and meal planning and all that type of stuff, and give those people time to practice, to learn, learn the information they need, practice the skills, build the behaviors, and then you can start removing some of that, some of those meal replacement items as they're more comfortable cooking and managing. They're more comfortable. They've built this habit of being active, and so it's the idea, like, tough to solve world peace in one day, but we can put these little steps in and try to structure it so they can get there. And I think those types of programs can help a whole lot of people. Do you have to use meal replacements? Absolutely not. And it really is that individual. What's your experience? What are you comfortable with? What are you already doing right now that's a health behavior? Can you rely on your exercise and you focus on your diet? Is your diet good? You got to focus on your exercise. Or for others, we're never going to have success unless we manage their stress. And we don't always think about that, but like you said, your stress might cause some desire for sugar or those types of things. Stress might lead to poor sleep. Stress might mean you're skipping exercise, and you're not meal planning, and you're not prepping, and you're not doing those things. So if we never help someone with their stress, we're probably going to struggle with all those other areas and behaviors. So I think with all that, like, find some support, whether that's a personal trainer that can help give you some guidance, whether it's a registered dietitian, whether it's somebody in a clinical setting, find somebody that can help. That's what they're trained to do. And I would say it's well worth the money investing in your health through those types of services.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like way more than just weight loss. We're talking about behavior change, and in the martial arts, I've done the martial arts my whole life, but I've done some karate. They say there's karate do. The word do means the way, and the way, they mean the way of life. And it really is. I think it has to become a way of life. Like, it's not something you can just visit, right? I can't just visit my 1 hour workout, get it done. Okay, that's it. Finally, I got it done. No, this has to kind of be a way of life, and we're going to chip away at it slowly. We're going to take one small thing at a time. That isn't really best done with like a 30-day challenge. Maybe if it's your wedding and you want to, you're preparing for an event, but this extreme change might not always be the best for most. It's like slow and steady chips away at behavior and literally changing your way of life to be a completely different way of life.
That's right. Like, it has to become ingrained. The people that view, if we're talking about weight management, that view it as something I have to do to get to this goal, are probably at more of a risk of reverting back and recycling through, versus building it in, like you said, into this is now the way I live. This is now the way I approach things. This is a lifestyle change that it is sustainable, and I don't want to discourage people from doing some of those short-term things, because sometimes people need that jump start to get going. Right. And if that's the way to jump in and get it going, like do it. For other people, that might be too much too fast, and you sort of burn out or get injured or whatever might happen, and it derails you or sets you back further than you were before.
Right. And it seems like, you just made me think of the importance of individuality. Like, whatever gets you to move more, for just talking about physical activity, if it is the 30-day challenge, some of us thrive off of challenges. We need to be challenged in order to get going. Some of us are more adventurous. Some of us need the stimulus. Some of us are okay with running on a treadmill, and don't need as much stimulus, Maybe someone functions better on a team or in a sport. Maybe someone's better at lifting weights and they want to have a little more of an emphasis on the bodybuilding approach, but just the importance of that individuality. And I think understanding yourself and almost like finding a good relationship, right? You're building a relationship with movement, and how do you find a good match for you,
Yeah, that's spot on. It's this individual thing, and it might change over time. You might change and find you like different things.
Right.
And I think for people, that self-exploration can be really exciting. And you learn more, you're trying more. For others, it's this black box, and they just maybe don't know where to start. And I think that's where partnering up with some of those other types of professionals can help,
Right.
or introduce them to something. Like maybe they never tried karate, in that, like, man, that would match that person so well, but they've never been exposed to it or encouraged, or given the opportunity to try it in a safe space.
Yeah.
Think like, hey, yoga could be very good. Well, thinking about someone who's struggling with their weight, to go into a yoga studio can be really, really intimidating. So
Mm.
how, giving somebody like that an experience to try it and understand what they're going into and practice, or get to a certain level of comfort before they go in, could be really helpful for them. So it, individualized, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that ability to find some support, or the motivation, like people are motivated differently. Some people like to measure everything.
Right.
Some people like a challenge. Um, some people are cheap. If I sign up for like a race or something and it's $50, I'm showing up because I need that t-shirt, so I'm
Right.
gonna
Right.
do the training. And some people need more encouragement, and so uh, sometimes you need that other person that can adapt, adapt the strategy to help you
Right.
discover how you can, be motivated best.
And then I think that can carry over, it seems like, to nutrition as well. It's like we're saying eat more fruits and vegetables, but you could pick any one. All right, you don't like, strawberries. Do you like pears? Like there's going to
Yeah,
be some type of fruit in that supermarket that you look at, or maybe that you'll gravitate more towards,
yeah,
and then fine, pick that one. There's going to be one vegetable that you gravitate more towards. All right, then go for, same thing. I think that individual approach in the nutritional
yeah.
side as well.
So some of those things too, um, uh, average American, and we're thinking about, has a pretty narrow set of foods that they eat, and a
Mm,
pretty narrow set of fruits and vegetables. And they might also have this notion, of like, well, vegetables are, carrots and peas and French fries and, that type of thing. And maybe, um, cauliflower is the thing that's last on the tray at the Super Bowl party, like that nobody eat, because raw cauliflower is just not that good. Like I don't like, but if you roast cauliflower, it
yes.
completely changes the flavor. Or, you can, people can learn that different techniques of roasting or cooking, or um, um, might make Brussels sprouts taste amazing, and they didn't realize it. And
Mm,
so sometimes challenging people, uh, sometimes they need, challenging to reach out and try something new. Like, what do you do with a spaghetti squash?
mm,
How do I, if I go to the grocery store, I don't even know what a spaghetti squash looks like.
right.
And so then if I get it home, how do I cook it? So there can be, from that side of things, where you're really building some foundation and pushing them into new places. And for other people, like, they're comfortable with that stuff, and it might be more focused on portions, or getting enough protein, or cutting calories, or, like, it's a different challenge, but it's the same individual approach, where you, difficult to do one size fits all.
Mm,
um, and figuring
yeah.
out, yeah, what someone needs, that's timely and relevant and meaningful and helpful. it's challenging to do it at a scale that,
Absolutely. And another good point that you were raising there. I love the idea of being able to take this vegetable, for example, like cauliflower, and there's a way to make it taste good. Where I am in Brooklyn, New York, we have a lot of neighborhoods that are rapidly changing and new stores opening up. And there's some people that are really, they're very savvy with diet, and but they've made like cauliflower taste like I've never made it taste so good ever. I'm like, wow, like how did you figure whatever you did in the kitchen,
yeah,
you made cauliflower taste really good. I'm not gonna lie. Like don't write it off so quick. There could
yeah,
be there could be a way, there's gonna be a recipe, there's gonna be something that you could do to this cauliflower to make it, taste
yeah.
real good.
And I thought, yeah, you making the pizza or tater tots or all sorts of stuff. Maybe in New York, that's frowned upon to do, cauliflower pizza or something. But
Look, yeah,
I think that's the thing. And then, yeah, if you try it once, doesn't mean you don't like it. There's other ways to cook and prepare things, and other ways to try it. And you might find out that it's not the cauliflower you don't like. You just didn't like it this way. And
yeah.
so going back to it, the same thing with exercise. The first time you do something, or the first time you do some strength training, your muscles are sore, generally.
Right.
It doesn't. I mean, we don't want to, hurt or cause an injury. But if we stop because we were sore, we never get to the place where our body's actually getting stronger. And some of the same thing on the nutrition side. If we stop after one attempt, we're not going to probably realize some of the benefits that we could have if we were to do it, over and over
Oh,
and over
good.
again.
And the hardest part is the change. So that makes complete sense. If anytime your body's doing something completely new, it's usually not going to like change, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a minute or two to get used to.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. The stuff that, people experience it when all of a sudden you add a whole bunch of, fruits and vegetables to somebody's diet that's not used to it. It's a lot of fiber, and a lot of fiber can cause some constipation or GI discomfort and those types of
right.
things. And yeah, your body gets pretty used to whatever it's been doing.
So do you think the body can get used to the fiber though, if you introduce it slow enough?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think some things that change more rapidly to, our saltiness and sweetness, like the flavor of things. So a lot of times, people having a diet that has a lot of added sugar, versus a diet with very little added sugar, a lot of, fruits and vegetables, and, or foods that are a little bit less processed, or less sodium in them. And then they can adapt to those types of things. And there's other stuff with, a lot of fiber quickly, making sure you're taking in enough water. That helps. Being a little bit active, that helps. So there's things that can help that transition go more smoothly. But then once somebody's sort of adapted to that diet of lots of fruits and vegetables, and generally, nutritious eating, and then they go back and have a meal maybe that they had before. Sometimes and not that fast food's bad, sometimes you might say just less nutritious than other foods, but they go back and maybe have like a high calorie, high fat meal, and it maybe tastes very salty compared to what they're used to now. And maybe that passes through their GI a whole lot faster, and so they experience the other side of it. So people that go through some of these program changes and lifestyle changes, they go back to something else, or like it's not even worth it, because now
Right.
my body's adapted to this healthier way. And their body doesn't like the old way anymore.
Yeah. Do you know if there's when it comes to that type of change about how long it might take before someone can, yeah, I guess see that type of, after like
Yeah.
30 days, maybe a month, 6 months, a year before they can really, like, how long would they have to stick with that?
Yeah, I don't, I'm not thinking of any, research papers off the top of my head, but just in practice, um, the body adapts pretty quickly. So sometimes we see it when we um, do maybe a little bit lower, manage our carbohydrates, simple sugars. People will go through a transition period within a few days
Mm,
and maybe feel more energetic and those types of things. Um, and then as people transition through a program, um, it could be 30 days in and all of a sudden they had something that they had before, like a soda or something like that, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet and sugary.
mm,
um, because maybe they've spent some time, not limiting desserts or limiting some of those sugary drinks, and so people will generally notice some of those changes. I think pretty early, some of the positive stuff
mm,
within days and weeks of
mm.
it, and if they go back to some of those old things, they'll start noticing that. But again, probably different for different people,
People, right?
and how strict they are or what sort of diet they're following. But I'm sure you've seen the same type of thing with exercise. If somebody does a certain type of training, um, and then they stop that and start doing something else, they go through a period of transition and adaptation and maybe soreness, and they go back to that like, gee, it's like I'm starting all over again.
Right.
um, and so our body physically is going to adapt to those types of things as well.
Yeah, I love the analogy of comparing it to physical activity because that's exactly it. Anytime you introduce something new you've never done before, you're going to be sore. You're going to be all these maybe uncomfortable things that come along with it, but then your body adapts and then vice versa. And I guess it's the same with your gut. I guess if you're experiencing, from having too much fiber, some gut issues, it doesn't, don't give up on it yet. Maybe just scale back a little bit, give your body some time to change slow, right? You're just doing too much too soon. And then let your body build up to that tolerance where this amount of fiber is more comfortable for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think people going um, through this that maybe haven't been doing these types of things with nutrition or exercise, um, can really learn to listen to their body, and
Mm,
become much more in tune, and notice if um, something's out of place.
mm,
And I think it's on both sides, and I'm sure you've seen it with all of your work too, that you really start to learn and listen to your body.
mm.
Is that little ache that I'm experiencing, is that soreness, or did I actually hurt something in my shoulder, and now maybe I need to take a couple days to not do something, and let it recover. And so people become very, very in tune with, maybe their hunger signals, or their full, when I feel full, or, how my, um, how's my digestion, or, how's my sleep or my energy level. Uh,
Right.
they start to notice those things when we're tracking, when we're paying attention, and we're really focused on it.
And on a genetic level, would you say that people digest certain nutrients or macronutrients differently?
There's some indication that is the case. It's difficult. Uh, some of it's related to the gut environment as well. Um, there are genetic tests out there that maybe indicate everything from our sensitivity to caffeine to maybe how we metabolize carbohydrates or fats. Um, the difficult thing is that sometimes those um, are difficult to replicate at scale, um,
Mm,
because of all of the things that we've talked about. So if we want to test, and that's the struggle with some nutrition research and weight management research, is low fat or low carb better. Um, it can be difficult to get people to execute those dietary plans effectively every day, over long periods of time, where we can see a difference and actually understand if these things are meaningful. Um, and and so there's a lot of regression to the mean. If they started on low fat, they end only a little low fat, or they start low carb, they only end up a little low carb. And I don't think we know quite enough from like a precision nutrition standpoint to say, Anthony, you respond best to this
Mm,
diet. And there are some papers out there about, some of those genetic factors in general, not just at macronutrient level, that they maybe only account for a little bit of the difference in weight loss.
right.
So if somebody loses, 50 pounds, maybe only a couple pounds can be accounted for today with our understanding of some of those genetic markers. So a lot of it, and I have some personal preference on some dietary strategies that I think are useful. But in a lot of situations, we'll talk to people about, your own body is your own little experiment.
Mm,
And so we're going to start with, like I said, some of our nutrition programs start with this from a structured standpoint, fruits and vegetables and those types of things. But then as you progress through, you're more confident, in all these other things that, all right, maybe it's a Mediterranean style meal plan, maybe it's a low carb meal plan, and go and try those, see how your body responds. Maybe you go and try low carb and you realize that, man, you didn't have quite the energy you thought you should have for your exercise. And then if you have somebody to help you out, it might not be, well, don't throw out low carb. It might be about your fueling, right? Like, was your exercise fasted? Did you eat afterwards? Did you crash in the afternoon? And so there's a lot of variables that you can play with. And so really encourage people from what we know now. Again, I have a personal preference,
right.
but I think people can view that as their own little experiment. If I do eat low fat, how do I feel? And
Mm,
then am I aware enough that if I'm eating low fat, some of the low fat products or something they might purchase might have added sugar, or those types of things. And so just being aware that just because something's low fat doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. Because it's organic doesn't mean it's real nutritious for us either.
right.
And so we have to be a bit skeptical in those situations, and we try it. And then I guess the last piece with this ramble is that people have personal preference on taste and flavors and those types of things. So if a low carb meal plan might be a really good fit for somebody, but that's not what they enjoy, and that's not what they can execute, day in, day out, week in, week out over years, that might
Yep.
not be the best fit for them. And so finding what works, is just as important as the other
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah, generally speaking, nowadays when I'm thinking of diet, I think of I always say protein and plants to people. I think that's a good place to start, and then from there, like you're saying, these other individual approaches. But it seems like, and tell me if I'm accurate, but protein can help to satiate you a bit, and could potentially help you to limit the amount of calories, but also increase the amount of muscle mass. And we talked about metabolic resting rates before, and that's
Yeah.
going to help with that. And then when we talk about plants, I usually think fiber is a good addition in the realm of minimizing calories and
Yeah.
and then minimizing craving, because once I have sugar, like I can continue to eat sugar way beyond past I'm full. And I'll be
Yeah.
full 20 minutes. People say there's always room for sugar. For me, there's always room for
Yeah.
sugar, and when you're having something that's a little more plant-based, there's a point that you get full and you're kind of like, yeah, I think that's enough. I don't want to have any more. But it seems like protein and plants and water, right? So when we're drinking,
Yeah.
but protein and plants is usually like a good recommendation of a general start for
Yeah.
most people, for me.
I think that start, even with limited guidance, like again, some people like to track every little thing. Some people will be a bit more intuitive about how they're managing. some of the protein recommendations are, what's essentially sort of the minimum. I think over time has become kind of the recommendation. So the protein
Mm,
recommendations a lot of times are a little bit too low.
mm,
Um, and we know that people aren't eating fruits and vegetables at the levels that they should. And so that's how I think about it too, is, you know, if I'm building a meal or a meal plan, we want to identify some good quality protein sources, and we want to surround them with as many fruits and vegetables throughout the day as we can. And in doing that, we're going to feel full, from like the protein. It's going to be more satisfying, and same with some fat too. And then the volume that we get, generally low calorie, high volume from fruits and vegetables is going to help us feel full. And so we'll end up eating less, even if we're not measuring you know everything we're putting in our mouth. So I think that's a great approach for a lot of different reasons.
right. And then from there, that individual, like you said, you're your own individual experiment from there. You kind of have to test with little things and figure out what's working, what's not, and make adjustments as needed based on you.
Yeah, yeah. I think it can be fun for people to start fine tuning to meet their goals, whether it's a health related, thing of managing blood sugar or lipids or something like that, or losing weight. Our biggest movers at the beginning of that is creating a negative energy balance through, taking in fewer calories and exercising a bit more. Making sure we have enough protein is going to help us maintain some muscle. Getting our fruits and vegetables is going to improve our health in a lot of ways and minimize our calories. But then as we get comfortable with that, that's where you can really start fine tuning and um, making improvements that target specific areas of whatever area of health you're focused on.
Right. Yeah. So as we slowly start to come to a close here, I know we went already longer than
Yeah.
I expected, but when it's a good conversation, it rolls. So I hope I'm not taking up
Yeah.
your time. But are there any maybe new insights that we didn't mention yet, whether it be through nutrition or whether it be through exercise that you've just seen in your practice that are worth sharing?
Um, I work with a really talented group of physicians, and so I'm on the research side, but get to collaborate with them in the clinic and see the things that they do. The Mention just briefly some of the tools that the physicians have now from different medications that can be effective. We still don't know everything about those, so there's other research team members in our group that are focused on people that are on some of those medications maybe not eating enough, and so they're losing more muscle than we'd like. And if they lose more muscle, it might set them up for some long-term challenge of maintaining that weight loss. So there's dynamic things, but those physicians, they do have new tools, and working with a physician that's trained in obesity medicine is important. I think the experience that a patient would get is going to be top tier, and they have the understanding of those medications and how to prescribe them effectively. And then on the other side, some people don't need medication, some people do, and that's all right. For those people, on the other side, really encourage people to find some support. Um, Love it to always, you'd be somebody who's trained, in
Right.
exercise science or nutrition and in those areas, or psychology and behavioral health, because I think there's a lot to be said about somebody who can guide you through something that maybe you haven't been through in the past, or support you if you get questions or you run into some bumps in the road, because usually it's not a perfectly straight line.
Mm,
Um, and then for people to understand that, um, and I think what I've come, over the years, is understanding that the behavioral aspect of it, the psychology of making these changes, is as important of the decisions on what macronutrient, or what exercise we're doing.
Right.
because it is complex, and people's social and emotional health is a important aspect of their overall well-being, and
Mm.
those things impact our ability to make changes in nutrition and exercise. And so thinking broadly about that, I think, like you said, too, that self-discovery, um, encourage people to do it with some support. That support could be friends and family and those things,
Mm.
or it could be a professional, but that that can set somebody up for some more success. Um,
What was the first one you said? The obesity expert? What was
yeah,
if
yeah.
someone
So
wanted to Google one in the area?
yeah, so um, there's a board certification in obesity medicine, and and it's again, there's other specialties. There's orthopedics and podiatry and
Right.
uh, endocrinology and all sorts of other areas, and those physicians and doctors and nursing teams, and that they've developed this deep expertise in those conditions.
Mm.
And there's also general practice and family medicine docs that are incredibly talented across the spectrum of things. And in the same way, in obesity medicine, these physicians, that I get to work with, and there's other ones around the country, they have a deep expertise in the complexities of weight management and obesity medicine, and
What would you call them? Like if I was Google an obesity doctor? That's them.
Yeah. I mean, and most of them will list that, they'll be board certified in internal medicine and board certified in obesity, and
Right.
it should be on their website. They'll be real proud of it,
Yeah.
because there's not that many out there.
Right.
Um, but that's a great point. But receiving some help from qualified people is important. And again,
Right.
I got to go to the dentist next week. I'm going to a dentist. And if
Right. Yeah. You're not going to go to the guy on the corner like, hey, I could help you out.
yeah. So same thing with, if challenged with weight, and they'll be able to help, create that team approach. If maybe there needs to be some behavioral medicine support or medication management or nutrition counseling or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
They work with patients like that all the time, so they're
Yeah.
positioned really well to help.
Well said. I like the when you got to get your teeth fixed, you're going to the dentist, right? You're not,
Uh,
it's funny. I think about when I was young, in high school, all the kids would just ask each other, so popular, like, what's the best exercise for building
yeah,
muscle, burning
yeah,
fat? And it's like, would you ask the same kids, like, if I need, a dentist, you
yeah,
need to go to the experts, and
yeah.
they're there, you got to utilize them. But the final, or one other thing that just came to mind, is a DEXA scan probably the best way for someone to measure their body composition? Would you say that's the
Yeah. There, we use that in a research setting, to measure somebody at baseline and after whatever they're going through intervention or observation. And we use that because that tells us the quantity of muscle and fat tissue, and it's I mean, there's a cost to it. It's used clinically in some settings, so some physicians can order that. Um, and in interesting states have different guidelines on who can run those. So in some states, it may be easier to access a DEXA scan. There are some other things. I mean, obviously, like MRI, quite expensive, difficult to do. You're not just going to go to a local gym and see an MRI there. Or probably not, not
right?
around here, not around here anyway. Um, but a couple of other things. Uh, Bod Pod, it uses air displacement, looks like a giant egg. Some gyms will have those types of things. That's fairly accurate in its prediction. There's a few companies, and we had worked with one that use almost, it's like 3D body scanning. So you stand on a platform, it spins you around, and takes all these depth images, and from that, from your weight and your height and all these circumference measures, it can predict body composition, and that seems to be, and they compare that to DEXA. So DEXA being that standard, they're all comparing it to. And then there's bioelectrical impedance, which is much more common. You can buy, but less accurate, more influenced by our hydration level. So, I mean, I have some scales in here, just a body weight scale that if you step on it, it may give a prediction or an estimate of your body composition. Again, it's not the most accurate, but if you're using that regularly, it can show trends over time. And then there are some more accurate ones where you're maybe holding some handles and you're stepping on it barefoot. And sometimes those are found in gyms and other places that they use for maybe an initial assessment. And so, yeah, DEXA would be great. There are a lot of other things. The same idea, if I have a Apple Watch or a Fitbit, they're probably going to count my steps slightly differently. Which one's right or which one's better? Don't know, or maybe depending on the person. But they're probably both going to show, like, if I move more today than I did yesterday, they're probably going to show more. If I move less today, they're probably going to show that I move less. Was it 225 steps less or 240 steps less?
Right.
Don't know if it matters, but directionally, a lot of those will show. And like I said, those other things are pretty affordable to get your hands on.
And then, how about waistline? Would you say waistline is even maybe more? When I think about health risk, when I'm thinking of obesity, I think of the waistline being even more of a risk factor than just body fat alone.
Yeah. And I'm writing something else down for you, but yeah, so there are some circumference things that can indicate risk, like a larger neck circumference linked to sleep apnea, larger waist circumference linked to diabetes and heart disease, and some of the other things that are challenging. The subcutaneous fat, that fat that's underneath our skin, that's what we generally see, and that's what we're generally worried about. But the visceral fat, the fat that we can't really see, or we need, a DEXA or MRI or CT or those types of things to measure, that's the fat that's around our organs. And that's actually probably more critical and linked to our health than the subcutaneous fat, but that fat's difficult to measure. But a waist circumference is waist, neck, those are great. And those can be good benchmarks. And I think a waist circumference, I mean, we've talked a lot about weight management. It's probably bad that I didn't mention this. Some of the things that we talk about are non-scale victories. And so even though I work in weight management and research in weight management and those types of things, there's the scale isn't the only way to measure success. So we can measure, changes in our waist circumference. We can measure changes in our energy, our mood, our sleep, the way our clothes fit. There's a number of different things, and we always talk about those as non-scale victories. And again, how we can scoreboard success. Sometimes our weight, maybe we hit a plateau, doesn't mean we're not making progress. And if we check in on some of those other non-scale related things, we might be able to measure progress, body composition changes, lower waist circumference, more energy. Like, wow, I used to have a tough time, walking a mile. Now I'm jogging a mile and going 3, so there's other aspects that we try to get people to focus on beyond just the scale.
Right. Yeah, I love it. That's a really good point. Wow, we went through a lot. We went, like I said, way more than expected. Just opening the floor. Is there anything you want to touch on before we close out?
I don't think so. I talked probably way too much, but
No, it's good.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's an exciting space. Appreciate you doing what you're doing, because there's a lot of people that I think it's difficult to get started and don't know where to get started. And so, giving them information is really, really helpful.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you taking the time. You carved out the time to be here today and sharing your expertise. So I really appreciate you and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. I
Oh.
do it again anytime.